introduce people in Start a Grind is usually with a standing ovation. So please welcome Chris Dilley. Now you feel really special, right?
I definitely feel special.
Okay. So I'd like to start at the beginning. So as far as like not even related to People's Food Co-op, but related to, just to find out more about Chris. So like where you grew up, or just like how, like the earlier years, like.
The earlier years, okay, cool. I grew up in New England, Connecticut, New Hampshire mainly, and moved around quite a bit. My dad worked for large businesses, so we moved around quite a bit. I spent what I think of as the coming into myself time in Connecticut until I was about 13, and then we moved to Virginia and then to northern Michigan. It was kind of a blur there, where it was only a couple of years here and there, and then so that's how I made it to Michigan, was via Virginia. And that moving around, I think definitely has definitely been become part of me. I've stayed in Kalamazoo now though for 23 years. I made it to Kalamazoo in 1993, and I love it here.
How did you end up in Kalamazoo?
Right, so I went to Michigan State University and studied anthropology with a focus on China studies and Chinese language, and moved to China. But before I moved to China, I came to Kalamazoo for 9 months, and that's when I moved to Kalamazoo. And then ever since when I came back from China, I moved there and lived there several times. I kept coming back to Kalamazoo. I just had friends here. So.
Well, I read a little bit about you being in China, but what was it that you did there? Like, what was the interest in being there?
Well, my interest originally was in linguistics and culture and language, and how culture influences language and language influences culture. Something called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which has totally been debunked, but really captured my imagination of how language and culture are intertwined and can really co-create each other in some sense. That was what interested me, so I moved to China after I graduated with my anthropology degree, and taught English and Humanities at a university in Beijing, at Tsinghua University. And, did that for a year, came back here for a year to earn money to go back, because the salary wasn't enough for my lifestyle, I guess, and so I had to come back here, earn some more money, and then go back, live for another year, kind of back and forth.
And what was the connection, I guess, because you said you went to Michigan State, so what was the connection to Kalamazoo?
Oh, I didn't even get to that part of the story. Yeah, so, well, I just had friends here. I went to Michigan State. I graduated from there. I didn't really know where to go. And Kalamazoo, I had friends, very close friends here. And so I came here to just kind of couch surf for 9 months before I moved to China. And
okay.
I just keep coming back.
That's cool.
I love Kalamazoo. That's why I keep coming back. So.
Look, that's great. We're in Kalamazoo, so I guess that's great. And, well, I guess, okay, so you were teaching in China, but what, was there something, was it there, or, what was it that led you even to being involved with food?
Yeah, okay. So, I think my connection to China was almost all from the very beginning about food, even though the language was and still is very interesting to me. I had some friends that I met as tutors, a Chinese couple, the man from Hong Kong and the woman from Taiwan. And when I met them at Michigan State, they were students at Michigan State, what we would do, I wanted a place to practice my Chinese, so I'd go over to their house. They'd literally invite me over. I'd come over at 11 in the morning. We'd go to the store. We'd buy food. We'd come back to their house. We'd cook lunch. We'd spend an hour cooking lunch. we'd hang out, we'd stuff ourselves, we'd hang out for 3 or 4 hours, talking in English and Chinese, and just like my head swimming in the language and delicious food. And then we'd go back to the store again. We'd spend an hour shopping and go back home and cook for another 2 hours. So for me, that relationship with China was really always in some way about food. And then when I moved to China, my friends there, the part of the language I was most interested in was always about food. My friends we'd go out to restaurants together, and my friends were always like, "You order, because you know what's on this menu. I can't even begin to order what's on this menu." But that was something that interested me so much, the food piece, that I learned a lot about it. So.
Okay. So eventually.
You don't seem satisfied with that answer.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I just thought maybe there was more, but.
I'm trying.
But I mean, it's your story.
Yeah,
so.
sure.
It's definitely interesting. So there's a relationship to food, there's a relationship to being in China, and then there's also friends in Kalamazoo. So I guess keep going in the chronology as far as.
Convince you. Well, the chronology then, I moved back to Kalamazoo and just trying to figure out what was next for me for a while. I worked as a graphic designer, I worked as doing in-home care for adults with disabilities, and got involved as a volunteer with the co-op. One of my friends that I moved here to live with had worked at the food co-op, so I kind of got interested there. I always have had a very strong tie to environmentalism, so for me that's what the co-op was about. It was like, okay, there's an environmentalist element to food, and that makes me excited. The thought of like how we eat, it's something that we do every day so many times, and we're so involved in it, can impact the planet in a good way or in a good way. So that's really what kind of excited me about the co-op. And obviously I already had this kind of love of food that I was cultivating anyway, so cooking, having a store that I felt good about the product choices, and it was all, basic whole foods that I could then take home and cook, which I love to do.
So, and at this point, and like, what would the co-op even look like? I mean, it wasn't where it is now. So
Right.
where was it, and kind of like how are the interactions at that point?
That was in 1993 when I first got to know PFC, and it was it was downtown on the corner of Cedar and Burdick, on the same block as the State Theater, but at the other end of the block. We had a mural that's still there, actually, of a pumpkin patch with different folks hanging out in the pumpkin patch. And it was small. I mean, I think our store now is small, but this was very small. This was probably twice the size of this room, was our store then. And 2 aisles. You couldn't pass people in the aisle without accidentally bumping into each other, or intentionally, I guess. But and when I first started working there and started, so I was on the board for a while and volunteering and things like that, and I got interested in more and more interest in it as I was doing other jobs. The opportunities, after I left the board, the opportunity arose to have, the manager at the time was moving on. And so I was curious about that. I was approached, would you consider applying for this position? And so I started thinking about it and thought, I'm really excited about food and the environment. And at that same time as I was on the board of PFC, I was also helping to found Fair Food Matters, which is a nonprofit in town that does education about local food and food systems. And I'm just getting really excited about how food fits together into community and into the environment, and more into social fabric. And yeah, so it was I think the story kind of swirls because it was a swirling time. I was doing graphic design and starting a nonprofit and on the board of the food co-op. It was like I didn't know what I was doing exactly. But I don't know if I do now though.
I know the feeling. I think probably a lot of us understand that. Like, yeah, see nods. Okay, so you're volunteering, and yeah, that's a good picture of.
Oh, yeah, the store itself, is that what you're
Yeah.
doing? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 aisles, and
Yeah.
there was a little bit of bulk food here, and then a little bit over here, and then a lot more back there. There was some produce, mostly produce was all in the same place, because you need one specific place for that, but I just mean to say, things were kind of chaotic, and
Yeah.
it was cool, though, it was cool, it was quaint that way.
It was, and other than like the Fair Food Matters, there wasn't really a lot of other
Right.
examples of
Right.
what was going on. And what year would this have been?
So it was, well, 93 when I got involved, but then it was, yeah, more in the Fair Food Matters time was 1999, 2000. So I started on the board in 98, in volunteering, and then founded Fair Food Matters in 2000. I think we started in 1999. And that was interesting because it was, the food co-op had this mission to both be a store and educate. And we were struggling to stay open just being a store. Just to keep the store open, and it felt like the education mission just kept getting either going by the wayside or distracting so much that it further challenged the store. And we just risked not being in business anymore. We had a couple of very close calls in the mid to late 90s where we, or if you look back in the Gazette, there were multiple stories about the co-op being this close to closing, and so a woman named Sue St. Ange, when I was on the board, came to the rescue of the PFC. She'd come from a restaurant background and came and really brought more of a business approach to the business, and she did a great job of shoring it up and building cash and keeping us from going down the tubes.
So how was it being run then before that business approach?
Well, it was, I don't want to detract from any of the ways that it has been run. There are really great people stewarding all the time, and the needs were changing.
Right.
And so it had been run the way it needed to, which was some farmers showed up sometimes and brought some food, and we did have distributors that we worked with, so there were some systems in place for that kind of thing, but it was more put piecemeal together, and kind of pretty reactive, like, oh, you're asking for whole wheat elbows, we'll get some on the shelf, and so there could be a lot more like kind of flow, I guess.
Yeah.
And so Sue, I think, just identified that that's exhausting and not always sustainable. So she was able to build some cash and
Yeah.
stay
No,
with
I
us. Yeah.
think that's cool.
Yeah.
But I ask because I think it obviously she helped, and there's been a lot of changes since then, but even if we're still, okay, so at the point that you accepted being general manager,
Yeah.
what was, that was passed, like when Sue had
Yes,
helped? And
she had
so-
stabilized the business at
Yeah,
that point.
so how was, what was the, what was PFC like at that point?
Yeah. Well, I think it was pretty insular, as a club. It really felt like a club. There were people who felt comfortable coming there and shopping, and then, maybe a lot of people just walked by not sure what it was. When you're in the store, that's what I was describing before, of kind of like a funky mix of like a bunch of products that went together in some ways, but weren't always together on the shelf with their, like, I think, maybe I'm old-fashioned this way, but like mustard and ketchup should just be like close to each other on the shelf. And we didn't do that, and that's okay, but we just started. So we started doing it. And so we had part of the way that we subsisted for so long is that we had shelving from other stores or restaurants or things that had closed, and so we'd inherit the shelving, and that became the shelving, and so you have this infrastructure that's like cobbled together and morphing all the time, and we were just like doing awesome creative, our best job of like showing up and opening a grocery store every morning with like, well, there's a new shelf, okay, well, let's put the baked beans on that one, and it was awesome. And so one of the things that I did when I started was, well, one, we didn't have a lot of product on the shelf. We were like, we'd gotten into a mentality in a way of like really retaining cash and weren't spending it on product. And so our shelves were pretty empty, or felt pretty empty, I think. And so Sue had done a great job of building cash, and when I started that, I had $28,000 in the bank, which for me at that point and now is still a lot of money in the bank. So so I was like, we got money. I don't know any better. So we got money. I'm going to go buy some product and put it on the shelves. And which I did. I spent $12,000 of that $28,000 right away. I just was, just oblivious, and it's worked out okay so far. So we filled the shelves, and people were like, oh, great, I can depend, like people were like, oh, I can depend on the product to be there. And so we started to build sales that way, and then we invested a little bit of that cash in taking some of the shelving out and putting in grocery shelving. And I found a source for that up in Traverse City that was where I borrowed somebody's 2-ton truck and just went and picked it up, but it was really cheap, and we were able to set the grocery store in a way that kind of felt like a grocery store. So we started like gradually to reinvent the store, focusing always on what we've always been focused on, which is high quality, natural, organic, local, as much as possible, but also trying to create a store environment that felt like you wanted to shop in, and it made sense, and you could get your needs met.
So I know that PFC is a cooperative, so how does that even fit into what you're talking about? Because you had volunteered, so obviously, there's volunteering involved, but and there's employees, but what is the cooperative part of it?
Yeah, well, so we're a consumer cooperative, so there are various types. There's consumer cooperatives, there's worker-owned cooperatives, and then there's producer, usually some blend of like a marketing or producer co-op where the folks who are making a product cooperate together to market it, or, like a grain elevator is one of those where farmers are producers. They bring the product, the corn that they've grown, all to the same elevator, and then it's the elevator's job the co-op's job to market that and get the best price they can. So that's different types of co-ops. Ours is a consumer co-op, so it's the consumer, it's the shopper who's the primary owner of the co-op. So we had about 240 individuals and families be owners of the co-op when I started.
And so how, so in the years, in the years since you've been there, so how have you seen the cooperative change, or how have you seen PFC change?
Yeah, a lot. It's changed an immense amount. And it's always been, did I mention that I went to school for Chinese and like language and culture? So I didn't have any idea how to run a grocery store. So, so it was really the people, the staff and the community and our owners and the board, we were all working together to figure out how to do this thing in a lot of ways. And it was really satisfying that way of really learning together of how to make this thing work. And so I've forgotten the question.
Just like once you were GM, just how it's changed.
Yeah. Well, so that first year, some metrics that we use, like that first year, I said we had 240 owners. Today we have 3,100 or so owners, individuals and families in the community. And that went from a $30 a year payment that you would make, and then you'd get I don't remember now, 5% at the register. You'd get a discount every day when you shopped, but you had to repay every year $30. To now we have an equity investment, so people actually own a share. Our community owns $475,000 or $80,000 of the value of the co-op through their $250 shares. So with that 3,000 people, people are paying in $10 a month or $50 a year, or the whole $250 at once. But that's really how we are capitalized, largely. In particular, the major change that we made was that store on Burdick Street was 784 square feet of retail space, and in 2011 we built a 3,123 square foot building retail space. So we were able to quadruple our store size, and we capitalized that in large part. Like half of the project costs came from our owners, either from that capital investment, that $250 share amount, or actually a combination of that and owner loans. So people saying, I'm committed to the store expansion, and actually the community lent us about $580,000 to be able to execute that expansion. So that co-op piece is, to us, it's the lifeblood. It's what, like, I mean, having a community ownership piece that keeps us capitalized. So, and it made that building possible. We had to get half the bank loans that we would have had to get, and I don't think that project would have gone if it weren't for our owners. I have one other metric too.
Sure.
Sales.
Yeah, go.
So the first year that I started, we got $394,000 in sales, and then in 2014 was our peak sales so far, and that was $3.6 million in sales. So quite a bit of growth, almost nearly 10 times in 12 years, 11 years.
How do you see? How do you personally envision like your role and maybe even the role of PFC, but maybe like how you're directing it?
Wow. How do I envision that? I feel it's changing all the time. It's just a
or maybe another way to say it is like, what's the direction? I mean, because
yeah.
what's the direction even beyond those metrics that you see it going?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So we are, as a cooperative, our structure is that the 3,100 owners, individuals and families, vote for a board of directors from among themselves, and that board of directors of lay people. It's not grocery store experts. It's our community saying, this is important to me. I'll help guide it. Those 9 folks' job, they have 3 primary jobs. One is to hire and hold accountable the person in my role. The second job is to direct have some fiduciary oversight and responsibility using policies largely, to make sure that we're not breaking the law, not evading our taxes or anything like that. And then their big job is to create our ends statement, like means and ends. I'm in charge of means, they're in charge of ends. And their job is to say, the North Star, like, where are we going? And so the answer to like, where are we going, is that we exist to create access for all to food that's healthy for people, healthy for land, and healthy for the economy. And there's genius in having that really clear mandate of, like, that's where we're going. And we know there's an immense amount of tension in that. And so like asking, like, what's my role? It feels like it's changing all the time, from being a grocery store expert, which, is just like constantly in flux. The industry's changing all the time, and there's so much complexity to a business that has a deli and produce and meat and cheese and packaged staples goods and so on. That, like, learning to do all of that it's like not possible for one human. So we have this immensely talented group of people that does that. And my role at once is like, be enough of an expert to have a good conversation with our produce manager about how to manage margin one minute, and then also get out of the way and let her do that. While at the same time having this bigger vision of, okay, access for all. So we have taken on, like, we're looking all the time at what does that mean. It's about price, it's about like hours and where are we in the community, and it's also about what kind of culture we're creating, where do people feel like it's accessible on the front culturally. So anti-racism is a piece of that for us, like recognizing that racism and sexism and ableism they're all barriers, and racism in our community is a huge barrier that's limiting access all the time to all kinds of services, as well as just, as we know from the Black Lives Matter movement, like limiting access to just life, especially for young black men. And so, like, acknowledging all of that and running a grocery store and like recognizing it all. So we have to take that access piece on and take it really seriously. So that's a really big element. And then healthy for people is like, we need fresh food, we need fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, lean meats. We need options that are gonna sustain people. Healthy for the land, it needs to be, as much as possible, it needs to be organic and sustainable, and we need to learn all the time, what does that mean? If science is changing and that analysis of that is changing, what does that mean? And then healthy for the economy for us is about, well, the cooperative piece, so our community owns this, how are we stewarding those resources, but also, our local purchasing program, so every year we're reinvesting $500,000 through our purchases back into the local farming community. You just get me going now, Stacey.
Okay. But this is there probably really isn't an answer to this, but is there a typical day, or like what is a day like for you?
Okay. It isn't, yeah, right, in one way it's not typical, but in another way, it's getting to work and walking the store, seeing how the store experience looks and feels, training myself to see it through a customer's eyes and not my everyday looking at the same things or seeing the same thing that didn't happen or whatever. It's like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Somebody's gonna walk in, never been here before. What are they finding? So walking the store, having one-on-ones with management team members, having an opportunity to review if it's financials or whatever is happening with HR, hiring, spending a lot of time with email, probably too much time with email. It's a lot of email. Yeah. But, so working closely with everybody. We also, 4 years ago, as recognizing that farmers markets are a big piece of access in our community, took on management of the Kalamazoo Farmers Market through an RFP process with the city. As we just are finishing our 4th season in that role of operator, and so have really created that as another business unit in what we do. And it's now we manage that market 3 days a week, and then also we were approached by the city of Portage to start a farmer's market behind the library for them on Sundays from noon to 4. And so our market team has taken that on. So we're still learning to know enough about markets and to support that team in being successful as well. That's a typical day right there.
I asked, right?
I had to say something.
But what do you see as, you answered some of this already, but what do you see as something that is missing in Kalamazoo? And it might not even be just related to PFC, and what do you see for those who are working on businesses and anything like that? What do you see that's missing?
Yeah, good question. So in the food realm, so my wife, Lucy Dilley, runs the Can Do Kitchen, which is a small food business incubator. So she and her board and staff member help together support startup food businesses. So that's the startup piece, and I think they do a great job right now. They're doing they support about 18 different small businesses that way. And then people graduate and move on to other kitchens. So what they do is provide a kitchen space, a certified kitchen space, as well as the expertise and access to resources related to brand development and financial planning and business planning and recipe development and sourcing ingredients, all that stuff that you need to start a business. So that's not missing because it's happening. But what's missing is this sort of like next step. So Can Do Kitchen is effective at helping people start businesses and get them to, say a $50,000 a year revenue potentially, I think. What we know from at least the way that the world operates now is that it's not until you're about $500,000 in revenue that a business, food business in particular, that's what I know more about, is going to be more sustainable. So that gap, what we're missing is a way to support people in scaling their businesses up through that gap more successfully.
So is it more of a knowledge, or is it like having those mentors available, or actually having
Capital.
The capital? Okay, so the capital, so like they get to a certain point, and in order to grow, they need more money to expand or something like that.
Yep, yeah, and understanding, there's something about technical knowledge as well, about what are my options to scale this product that I've been making a certain way, if it's a small batch product, retain the quality, but be able to make it on a large enough scale where I can pack it and ship it and tap into the distribution resources are there. It's just the volume, being able to produce at a volume at a cost that then becomes accessible.
Okay. Thank you.
So if anybody can solve that one, I'd be really happy to talk to you. Right now or after this would be fine too. Lucy really want to talk to you, actually.
Yeah. So, actually, I think I'm gonna open it up to questions from the audience. Alright, I probably still have more, but I'll take a break from being the one speaking and ask if anyone out in the audience has a question. So,
Actually, oh, okay.
wait.
Okay. You were talking about like getting to the next level after the food incubator. I thought when you said that was really interesting because like the company I worked for over the summer was a small food business, and that was the problem they were having too. So they were actually working on starting one in Detroit, like the next level to scale up. So is there anything that is in the works for Kalamazoo, or is there like any kind of plans they wanted to do that? Or is it just kind of like trying to figure it out right now?
Yeah, I think it's trying to figure that out right now. There are people who know a lot more about it than I do, that are, like my wife, and there's some businesses that are incubating or supporting at the 500,000 plus level, like that. It's interesting that there's this like startup support, and then there's this like support at the higher level, but it's that gap. It's like you're running that, just a really risky run to get from 50,000 to 500,000, right? That's just like compatible.
Yeah.
So there are some of the, at that higher level, folks talking to Lucy and her team, and they're trying to figure out, if it's a capitalization piece, like how do we navigate that?
Yeah.
So how do we close that gap?
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting because like another company had the same problem, so it was like kind of cool.
Yeah, what type of food product was that?
They were making drinking vinegars, so they were like going in with a bunch of other local food businesses to create like this other bigger thing.
Interesting.
So it was really cool.
Oh, and that was in Detroit?
Yep.
What was the name of the collective?
Well, it was supposed to be called Detroit Feast, but like there was a lot of issues that was going on, like building permits and all that kind of stuff, so it kind of got held up, but hopefully soon there's something.
Okay, cool.
I had a question about starting a co-op.
Yeah.
So you listed a few different types. I'm specifically interested in co-ops that might own property.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've heard of Northeast Economic.
Yeah. In Minneapolis?
Yeah.
Yep.
So something like that.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how to start a co-op from ground zero, and what kind of skills you would look for in the core team.
Awesome question. So starting a co-op from the ground up, and not having done it myself, I can imagine, and I've ironically I'm working to support startup co-ops often in the area or around some parts of the country, and So that kind of a co-op would be different than, so I'm usually supporting people in developing food co-ops, so that to me, because it's a consumer base, I'm looking to develop the base, like, we're not gonna open doors until we have 1,000 owners, that kind of thing. So I don't know what if it's appropriate to think about it similarly, like, what's the base, is it an investment base that you need to establish, you know? What's the kind of metric you decide on, like, when you know that you're ready to kind of move forward? I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but I do know people who who started NEIC, and I could connect you with them for sure.
Yeah,
if that
that'd be
that's
fantastic.
helpful. And the core team, I think, yeah, it's such a different concept than what I'm engaged in that I would defer to them on that as well, you know, and what's been working for them. I know that Amy, the manager of it's actually the person that I know, Amy Fields, the manager of the Northeast, or the East Side Food Co-op in Northeast Minneapolis, and she and others in that corridor work together to create NEIC. And so she's a very she's a very business-minded person, and I'm certain that's part of what you need in that team. But then what else do you need? I mean, in the case of you need connections, you need relationships, obviously, is the fundamental of it, I think. So I'm happy to connect you, but I don't have anything more to offer, I'm afraid.
That sounds good to me.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
You talked a little bit about supporting local communities and specifically local farmers.
Yeah.
As growing up on a farm myself, I'm really passionate about that. So can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of the co-op, and also maybe something interesting you learned or some unique challenges that you faced with, supporting local communities like farmers?
Yeah, thanks. So the first part of that question again?
What were some interesting things that you learned moving towards supporting local farmers?
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, the why of that is really that I think in the local we have the opportunity to impact the Healthy for People land and economy all in that same, growing methods matter, and we acknowledge that, and having local fresh food grown using all kinds of methods is still like fresh, very healthy food. So to me, that's the why of that. The things that I've learned, I've learned so much over the last 13 years. I'd really not been to farms before I started looking at the co-op, and so that was an awesome opportunity to just get to know farmers. And I think some of the things that I had a really specific story that's going to come back to me in a minute about things that I've learned or been inspired by in working with local farms. As a business, though, we are, so I mentioned, so I'm going to use a Spartan store for an example. A Spartan store so a Spartan store has one distributor. They're going to get 99% of their product from the one distributor. And that's a super simple system, or relatively simple system. You know what's available in the warehouse, you know what the distributor can get you, they're your distributor. So we don't work that way. We work, because it's our commitment to work with local farms and other producers, we have a lot of one-on-one relationships that there's no distributor involved at all. In fact, so about half of our product comes from United Natural Foods, which is the only national natural foods distributor, and it's the only natural foods distributor, at least that we currently work with in this area. Half of our product comes from them. A lot of the box product on the shelf, mainly. A lot of refrigerated and frozen stuff too. Produce is coming from a couple of three different distributors plus 25 local farms. Throughout the store, you're going to find meats and cheeses and dairy products, yogurts, as well as some boxed canned goods, some drinks and beverages, things like that. They're coming from as close as the Can Do Kitchen. We work with different clients from the Can Do Kitchen and other Kalamazoo businesses. And then we call local within 100 miles, so we work with about 90, last year we bought from about 95 businesses that were within that 100-mile radius. So that is the really interesting challenge, right? So if we're gonna relocalize our food system, how do we make that, how do we systematize that kind of network in a way that's financially affordable and sustainable for the farmer and for the consumer? So we're doing it, at least it's, we get a lot of feedback that prices, are high, and they are high on organic, they are high. And that's whether you go to us or Meyer or Earth Fare or wherever you go, like, prices on organics higher than non-organic, so. But for the quality of the food, it's the same price, but largely the same price whether you come to us or Meyer Organics or Earth Fare or whatever. It's largely the same price. So the price piece is really like something that we're constantly grappling with, and is really maybe more of a food issue than a specific to our store issue. And we need to be constantly figuring out how to make those systems sustainable. And I hope that part of what we're doing is innovating in a way where it becomes more possible to have, maybe creating networks of farmers that are working together to distribute, things like that. I don't know what those innovations are yet, but ways that we have to keep innovating to be able to arrive at a place where the systems are in place and it works, to work with local farms and get that to local folks and still have it be affordable.
Awesome, thanks.
Anyone else come up?
Yeah, I just have a couple of quick questions. First of all, what's your main form of community engagement, getting people engaged and getting owners involved in the co-op? And also, there's been a big movement recently, against the commercialization and mass production of food towards like a real food solution. And I'm sure, how has that affected the rise of the PFC over the past decade or so?
Yeah, thanks. So that first question, or that second question I'll answer first, because for 20 years now, organic has had double-digit growth as an industry. And so it took us a while to catch up, but we caught on to that wave at a time when it was, the PFC and NHC, Natural Health Center, and Sawal's in town as the naturals. And I think we all just experienced a lot of growth for 10 years of just recognizing, or 10 plus years of this kind of industry growing and the interest in natural and organic growing. Maybe I didn't have enough my Wheaties today or something, but I don't remember your first part of your question. This is terrible, it's like the third time I've asked it. What was the first question?
It's just, how do you guys get the community engaged?
Yeah, community engagement, love it. Okay, so couple of ways that we do that. So we try to make the space itself engaging, both at the store, and then also certainly farmers markets to me are that's all that is, right? Is community engagement in a marketplace, right? So it's a pop-up placemaking event where our team literally has a parking lot or a pavilion to start with. It's empty. They show up at 5:30 in the morning. They start assembling an event, and by 7, it is booming, right? And on a Saturday, we might see between 8,000 and 12,000 people there coming through the Kalamazoo Farmers Market. And 130 businesses might be on market on any particular day. I mean, to me, that's a hugely engaging experience. But we've long had a commitment at the PFC before taking on the farmers market in that scale, to having store events where we have our 100-mile market on Wednesdays. We've done, in fact, last night was on our last 100-mile market, and we had a $4 spaghetti dinner on the bar, and we had market vendors outside, and we had music outside until it torrentially downpoured, and then the music came in the building, and then we at the front, you walk in, and instead of carts in the cart corral, you have musicians hanging out, and And it just feels great to be in a place where it's like, it feels real. It feels like you're not grocery shopping here. You're like engaging in the community. So that's kind of the goal, is like in that space, even every day, let's try to figure out ways to make that space feel real.
Awesome.
Any question?
Sure.
You mentioned before about education, how you were trying to run, I think that before you were.
Yeah, we had to
Doesn't
kind of
matter.
detangle them.
Yeah, so, what exactly were you trying to educate on?
Yeah. I think largely the mission, in a sense, or the vision, or the ends of our co-op is like, what about food makes it healthy for people, healthy for land, healthy for the economy? What are the choices we might make every day? Like, there was a lot of education about GMOs and organic and that stuff when it was kind of newish, and now for us that's about I think a large hurdle often is cooking, like skills and and confidence in cooking, and so that's we do cooking classes every month. I think we do a lot less of the education internally now.
And is that just because society has learned about GMOs and that sort of thing, so you don't have to educate anymore?
Or is it, are we back to the same original problem? I think maybe we're back to the same original problem of like, it would be great to be doing more of that education and time and energy.
I see.
Yeah. And I think we're not, like, we used to be, and you were alluding to this, like it was PFC and then Fair Food Matters, and that was really, well, and then I'll definitely want to tout Food Dance. I mean, early adopters of food in our community, food transformation in our community. But we were the ones kind of like trying to elevate that. And now there's so much interest and there's so much knowledge. Like, I wouldn't pretend that the PFC has the corner on the market of like nutrition education or even agricultural practices. Definitely not. I mean, KVCC now with their Food Innovation Center and their whole culinary program is this immense amount of energy and momentum and excitement and knowledge around that stuff.
Thanks for all the questions. I guess in your experience, in all the experience that you've talked about, what are takeaways? Like if you were going to give, I don't know, up to 3, just takeaways of, because or maybe even back up a little bit, and because you're talking about, you mentioned innovation in one of the answers to the last question. So I mean, PFC is not a startup. So I guess, what do you mean by that?
That's
and maybe
the big elephant in the room, right? Is I'm actually an entrepreneur, right? That's the
right.
I don't know if anybody else
So
did that.
so what are like what are I mean, I guess explain a little bit about innovating even though you're not a startup, and
Yeah, right.
and just like some of the, well, I'll ask you the second one later, so you don't have to ask me.
This is learning. We're learning together. That's
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's the exciting part is, over the last 13 years that I worked at the co-op, we've reinvented ourselves multiple times, and that's all, in response to what the community is asking for or needing, and the perception we have of like we're just trying to ask ourselves all the time, what's the best way to do something, and what are the barriers in the way of getting that thing done, and I mean, yeah, we far from have it all figured out by any means. So that's the fun part, right? Is like, what changes in the market are going to happen next? What changes in technology are going to happen next? I'm really interested right now in this idea of food as a service. So we got the Blue Apron, the mail service, the CSA is another kind of food as a service. All kinds of different ways in which technology and the way that society is moving and trending is changing what people want and need from a food experience. It's no longer just like, it's like it used to be, you went to the grocery store every 2 weeks. This is where my family did. 2 weeks, you stock up, you get everything, and then you go in another 2 weeks, and in between, you're just doing everything else at home or stopping for a gallon of milk on the way home from work. That is not how we eat now, right? I mean, a lot of people, like millennials, I mean, especially, definitely, y'all are, you know, I don't know why I shouldn't speak to you about millennials, but anyway, like, we're doing multiple trips a day, you know, I mean, a lot of our shoppers are shopping multiple times a day, and or shopping really focused on fresh, so it's changing so much. So the innovation piece is looking at that and trying to understand what the next steps are and the trends are, and be ready to do that. Like, is there an online need? Is there for what we do? Is it a recipe? Is it is it about recipes and cooking? Is it about, like, it's just too much work to go shopping? I hate grocery shopping, so I just want to be able to order it online and have you drone it to me or whatever. That's a verb, right?
Well, it's because a lot of times people think that if you're not a startup, then you don't have to innovate because you figured it out, you're making it. So it's like, so what you're saying is that the world changes, so we have to change with it. So, you know, even what we figured out today might not be the answer for tomorrow, or even in 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what, I mean, I'm noticing that more and more. You know, just when you think you've got it figured out, then the whole thing, you know, again, anything can change, so, yeah.
So now that you've been in this role and been involved, and even your experience before PFC, what would you say are takeaways as far as like a major lesson learned that is worth sharing?
Well, I mean, one is what we're talking about is just don't get complacent. You know, like, don't think that you got it all, that it's all sorted out. And, you know, I mean, we want to be really, really good at what we do. And so we tend, for us at the story, like and at the markets, we tend to like hone in on like the way we're going to do it. And then as a cooperative, I think we have it in our DNA to be also on, you know, like, we're gonna do our best to laser on the best way of doing something, and then also we're always listening to, like, well, and now we need you to do it this way, you know, and be ready, just be ready to develop and change, and but not lose heart in the fact that we haven't lost anything by having to change. It's like, it's good. It feels scary sometimes, but it's good.
So did you ever think that what you went to school for would equal something like this?
No. No. I remember I got the job, went through the interview process, and I think it was actually after my interview for the PFC job. I went walking around, D&W is like my favorite non-PFC grocery store in town, and I went walking around there, and I was like, I'm in this grocery store that I really like, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? I'm gonna run a grocery store, you know? And so even in that moment, I didn't think this is even after I, you know, was like interviewing, I still was like, what am I doing? So no, I didn't see this coming.
So anybody else have any more questions?
Yeah, I do have one. I'm sorry, my name's Ernie.
Hi.
Do I have to use that?
Yeah.
All right.
We all have to.
Okay.
This.
You've mentioned the word grocery store quite a few times.
Yeah.
I'm just very curious.
Yeah.
Is PFC a grocery outlet, or are you guys something else?
So
There's a reason why I'm asking that.
I'm sure there is. I'm feeling baited, but I'm gonna persevere. So we are in existence to create access to food that's healthy for people and in the economy. We can do. My board has put that out there very explicitly and specifically, not saying PFC exists as a grocery store, right? So no, effectively PFC is not. That's the outlet we know how to do right now, and as well as farmers markets. But our goal is to create access for all the food that's healthy for people and in the economy. If there's a different way of doing that, there's a better way of doing that, then that's our job to do that. We just, right now, that's what we do. So.
I see. Okay, so I don't know a whole lot about food cooperatives.
Yeah. That's
But I do know that food co-ops typically carry a lot of organics, natural products.
Yep.
And you talked about stocking the shelves. I assume that's basically buying a lot of box products. Yeah, with the competition around,
Mhm.
with all these big chains, and even Spartans to a degree, I know Meyer certainly has
Yeah.
been dangling with the organics and so
Oh,
forth.
yeah.
And Walmart's getting into it. It gets pretty tough.
Yeah.
You know, when you're dealing with the realities,
Yep.
as you try and balance that vision of supplying sustainable food,
Yep.
improving that food system locally,
Yep.
and yet you've got these big kahunas coming after you, and it's pretty tough to survive. So that's why I'm curious,
Yeah.
when you use that term grocery store, I'm thinking in my head, you know, to me, as you're describing what you guys do,
Yeah.
I feel that you guys are really producers of food instead.
Mm.
You're creating like locally specialized stuff that people want around that community, as opposed to buying stuff that you can get from LA
Right.
through a distributor, shipped right to your store, and
Right.
Spartans can do that.
I mean, that's what makes us special, is that I would say we're curating that. We're not producing it. Our deli does produce some stuff, but like, we're curating that.
Right, right.
We're identifying the needs, and then the customer needs, and then trying to fill it with a product, ideally locally, ideally organically. And that's the most kind of generative part of what we do, is like, is
Okay.
be on the lookout for those products. And-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it frustrating, trying to balance some of those business realities with doing the right thing?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like I really, the question about how do I kind of see my role, it's changed a lot. I mean, I have mostly seen my role as being the executive director of a nonprofit in a lot of ways. Like, it's my job to, like, I have this end statement, and this is our program we do, is the grocery store and the farmers markets. And what's changed is, we can't just show up and turn the lights on and, and place orders and hopefully have enough stuff on the shelf. Like, we have to be really good at showing up as a market, as a grocery store. That's why I keep saying that. Like, I think we need to recognize that we need to, whatever we choose to do, whatever our program is, we gotta be really good at that. Because we're not the only game in town, and we might, we might look the same in a lot of ways, and so we have to constantly be figuring out how to elevate what makes us different. But also, if you just need to come in and get an apple or an orange or something, you gotta recognize us as a place you could do that. So,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
Thanks.
Good question, thanks.
So
Yeah.
my last question, and then I'll my way back up, is there anything else that hasn't been discussed that you would like to add?
Let's see here. That's a good question. I think things that I'm interested in and excited about are, and we've kind of touched on them, are the how technology and society are changing, how issues, like social issues, impact what we're talking about as far as any business, but as a cooperative, recognizing there's kind of like this broad-based need. I don't know, I don't have any other, I think we've touched on a lot of things. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this.
Thanks. I want a round of applause. Thank you.